Hi, this is Barry, and welcome to the Simplicity Zen Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you could take a moment and hit the subscribe button and the alert button if you've not already, I'd appreciate it. Also, the like button helps as a input into YouTube's algorithm to share this to a broader audience. Also, if you have any friends or Sangha members that you think would be interested in this podcast, I'd appreciate it if you alerted them to its existence. If you are watching this on one of the many podcast apps, you can subscribe to there, or you can go through to our website at simplicityzen.com and subscribe there. Our guest today is Shana Smith. She's an assistant Zen teacher under Valerie Forstman in the Sanbo Zen tradition, and a longtime yoga teacher. She is the facilitator of Florida Sanbo Zen, and she continues her studies under Henry Shukman, Valerie Forstman, and Ruben, Habito. She is additionally an author and singer-songwriter. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Barry.
Great. Before we kind of dive into stuff, will you tell us a little bit about what kind of music you do and what kind of writing you've done?
Oh, sure. I'd love to. So it's funny because my name actually it rhymes with banana. It's Shana Banana, but
Okay.
I answered anything. Don't worry about that.
Did I say your name wrong?
I think you said Shana, but it's okay
I'm
because
so sorry.
who would know, and that's totally, but the only reason I bring that up is because of your question about music. I'll show you. My main career over the years has been as a children's musician. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, maybe do it sideways. It's glaring a little bit. Yeah,
If you can see, yeah.
pull it back
Shana
a little bit.
Banana.
Okay.
Shana Banana.
Are you sure it's not Shauna? That would be so much easier.
Shana, it could be Shana Banana. That would work too. Yeah, Shana Banana. Yeah. Anyway, it's been my primary gig, I guess you could say, for a very long time. Some going on 25 years now, since I was very young. Children's music. So I call it music and fun for kids, and it's all original edutainment, educational music. So it's just been a wonderful career. I love it. But I also do singer-songwriter music for grown-ups as well as Dharma music. This is my latest CD, Oak Tree in the Garden, which many will recognize as a famous Zen koan.
Yeah, that artwork is amazing.
Isn't it? That's Java John Goldacker. Shout out to a friend of mine who's an artist, and he's truly talented. This CD actually contains songs from the Zen and Buddhist traditions, like the metta song, the Han recitation, Heart Sutra, Bodhisattva vows. So there's this Dharma music CD. And I recently just became the music director at the Unity of St. Petersburg, Florida. So it's a church, but it's a progressive, inclusive one for even for people like me from a not church background.
Is it Universalist Unitarian or something different?
It's called Unity.
Okay.
Unity, yeah, Unity Church. Yeah, I think still loosely under the Christian tradition, but so incredibly inclusive that I feel very comfortable there as a, half Jewish Zen Buddhist practitioner and yogi.
Do you offer sitting to that congregation at all?
We are starting up a Zen group in St. Petersburg nearby. Yes. So at a very nearby place called Sacred Lands. So if anybody ever comes to St. Petersburg, Florida, those are two wonderful spiritual destinations. Great. And in amongst all the Mickey Mouse and all that stuff. So yeah. Anyway, so that's music, and music has always been, I would say, even an early entry point into self-examination. When I was very, very young, when I was, you go through the angst of being young, even at a very young age, I'd pull out the guitar and sing it out and feel, all the emotions. What do we do with them? And that was my first experience with becoming present with them, not knowing that's what was happening by singing with them. And it remains to this day a very powerful and meaningful and poignant self-practice versus being an entertainer. Even working with children, it's all about energy exchange and sharing and becoming present to how we can just water the wholesome seeds.
Did your parents, was music something they encouraged in you, or something you kind of picked up on your own, or how did that work?
They did. My dad was a sax player in a big band. He loved his music. And my mother has a beautiful voice. She would always sing everywhere she went, humming or singing. So they actually made me take piano lessons. And to this day, I regret what a difficult child I was rebelling against the piano lessons.
Mhm.
Because to this day, piano is not my strongest instrument. I really put up a fight. But guitar was the one that really resonated from like second grade on, and they were very encouraging of
Was this a
that.
classical guitar or a steel string, or?
Steel string. Yeah. And
Um,
writing too, writing. I always wrote my own songs and still do. I prefer that original work. I think that's part of the mindfulness practice, bringing what's inside and expressing it freely, is what writing's all about. So I then became an author, and I'm still very much a writer.
mhm. So did you grew up in Hawaii? Is that right?
Yes, born in Hilo on the Big Island, mhm,
Mhm.
and then moved to Oahu when I was in elementary school. And then we moved to Florida just in time for high school, which at the
What
time was a tragedy. No, just kidding.
What did your parents do that allowed them to live in Hawaii?
My dad was he's passed away, but he was a professor, a marine biology professor and a medical doctor. And he's actually a native Californian, born and raised in East LA, like the Cheech and Chong song,
Mhm.
if you remember that one.
Yeah.
Um, but his dream had always been to live in Hawaii. So when he was very, very young, he went out there and actually went to University of Hawaii and got all his degrees there and in California as well.
So was his career more as a doctor or more as a educator slash biologist?
His heart was as an educator biologist. He came from very humble means. I mean, they lived in East LA in a really bad area. And I think the medical degree was a way um, to find security, to be honest,
Mhm.
to be frank. And on what ended up happening, though, is his marine science research crossed over into the medical field because he did some groundbreaking work using marine animals as models for human biology and giving clues into everything from curing cancer to uh, helping our allergenic system, because marine animals have simpler physiologies that can be used for different types of research to give insight into our more complex human systems. So he ended up merging the two fields in a really neat way.
Interesting. And your mom, did she have a career? Was she a homemaker? I guess that's a career too.
Oh, it is definitely. Yeah. Well, yes, and yes. So she was a teacher for much of her life, and growing up, she was either a principal or a teacher, and also somehow managed to be a more than full-time mom. It's kind of a superwoman.
Mhm.
She's 81 now and is still a superwoman. I don't know how she does as much as she does with such joy and ability, but she's
Mhm.
a real dynamo. Mhm.
Yeah. Um, and you mentioned half Jewish. Was that on your mom or your dad's side?
That's on my dad's side.
So you're
Yeah.
not technically Jewish then, right? If I
Like,
understand.
but, everybody says that, but I don't understand how that can be. I mean, they're like half nothing. I'm not sure how that
I
works.
it I've been told, and I don't know if this is true, but I've had a couple people tell me if you're Jewish from your mom, you're Jewish, but if it's through your dad, you're not technically Jewish.
I think in the Jewish faith, that's true, but
Uh-huh.
there's definitely a genetic Jewish that
Right.
exists. I mean, we actually did the ancestry 1, 2, 3 or one of those, and it said half Jewish, solid half,
Mhm.
with a whole diaspora of folks who come out in their DNA. I really don't know the answer to that question. I just don't know what else I would say, you
Well, I
know.
mean, there's a test. Do you like Concord wine?
Um,
I'm joking. When I, I had a lot of Jewish friends as a kid, and during a lot of
yeah.
holidays, they would drink this Concord wine. Yeah,
Right, the really sweet stuff. Yeah,
right.
I know
Yeah,
what you're saying. Yeah.
gefilte fish.
Yeah, yeah,
I loved Jewish food growing up. Um,
right.
basically, and then then I saw my friends go through bar mitzvah, and I'm like, so can I convert? The food's great, the families are great.
Yeah.
Money when you
Yeah.
turn 13, or
Well,
12.
that's, yeah, yeah. Being Jewish is a really funny, funny thing, or half Jewish is even funnier, like that Cher song, Half Breed. You just don't. And I remember even grappling with it early on, really wanting to be Jewish, because somehow it gave me some sort of an identity. And it's funny with Zen practice, that all just kind of disappears. It's kind of an interesting footnote or side note that, yeah, I grew up, I know I know Hebrew and Yiddish words like you wouldn't believe. We have, the cultural influence was huge. The religious influence was minimal, namely because of where my dad lived. They tried to send him off to Hebrew school. I mean, he's a first generation in this, I think. I'm not even sure, but anyway, they tried to send him off. Yeah, his parents immigrated here, so they tried to send him off to Hebrew school, and he was beat up to a pulp in that neighborhood where they lived. So he never was able to get a formal religious education. But the culture, the language, the food, that was transmitted, and then on to our family as well. So but in Zen, I remember asking Ruben, as a matter of fact, once, sometimes I just don't know, when people want to identify with a faith or a culture, an identity. Am I half Jewish or half not? And he says, well, you're all Jewish and you're not.
Right.
you know,
Henry Shukman in his book, he talks a lot about, he was half Jewish, I think, right?
on his father's
Is,
side.
yeah, still is half Jewish. So he's not
Yeah.
official either. So
Same as me, yeah.
we'll have to let him know he's not really Jewish. But he talks about in his book, and he may have talked about it in our interview. I can't remember. He's talked about it in some interviews, at least. How he kind of felt like he didn't belong in either world, and kind of
Right.
motif. Were you able to relate to that at all?
Oh, absolutely. Especially with the more, Orthodox Jewish communities that absolutely, I'd have to religiously convert. Otherwise, there'd be no acknowledgement of being half Jewish. Now, there are very progressive Jewish communities that come on in. Jew belong is the phrase that I think is great. But truthfully, I have, again, Zen has kind of attenuated that sense of need to
Mhm.
belong to any sort of tribe, or that whole I'm this and you're that. It just all sort of dissolves. Rather, there's this acknowledgement of tremendous oneness, while also celebration of tremendous diversity, even the not knowing part. That even that is part of this radiant thing that we have, just being human. So yeah, it's become much less of something I think about so much, other than funny jokes growing up, or Yiddish words, or things like that.
Makes sense. So it sounds like you were raised kind of atheist, agnostic, then.
I would say agnostic, deeply spiritual, in terms of a reverence for nature, for others. Both of my parents, my mother actually, to this day, she's my first guru or teacher or Zen master. Incredibly compassionate. Always, we were always taught to look at things in terms of how we can help versus how we can get, which sometimes has been a disservice. Last shirt, it's yours. But nonetheless, we've also learned discernment over the years, and she's been just an incredible guide and voice. My father, I'd say his main influence was the deep reverence for the natural world, and how, I guess that would have been our temple, our church, our synagogue, our mosque was, that was our time. In fact, Sundays, or those were the days we would immersively be in nature, usually the ocean.
Did you dive or scuba dive?
All
I
of
mean,
that,
dive or
yes.
snorkel?
All of it,
So
yes.
you got certified as a little kid or whatever.
Yes. Oh, yes. Definitely got a boat captain and scuba and everything. Yes.
I have to say, my scariest dive experience in my life was on the Big Island. I went out with,
Oh,
I think in retrospect, he was like not a certified scuba guide or whatever. Yeah,
Really?
he took us out of this place and had this huge swell, like 20 feet back and forth, and people were
Yeah.
banging against rocks, and I ran out of air because he wasn't paying attention. And yeah, pretty
Really?
down there though.
Yeah, it is. It's funny though. I actually got certified in Florida as a teenager.
Oh,
And then
interesting.
yeah, and in Florida the water's much shallower
Right.
and calmer and warmer
Mhm.
because it's the Pacific is big and cold, even though Hawaii's tropical. So then I went back to Hawaii all like certified, ready to go diving, and not quite as bad as experience you had, but surprisingly different than, it was super big swells and the currents underwater. I
Right.
remember everything, we were going like this, we could feel it, and cold, and yeah, it's the wild Pacific is different experience.
Not that people want to hear about our scuba diving, but I'll have to say one more thing.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah.
One thing I noticed is as long as you went to healthy reefs, the reefs themselves were more impressive in Florida, I thought. But the
Yeah,
fish and wildlife was just insanely diverse in off Hawaii. I've never seen it.
I agree.
It's like
Yeah.
it's like psychedelic wonderland. It's just incredible. Anyway, sorry.
Well, no, I think this is all Zen, right? I mean,
Uh-huh.
you can't fall out of it. Rick Hansen uses that term wild arising. Ever since I heard him use it, that's what I think of when you describe, diving in the wild and diverse Pacific. It's everything just
Yeah, it's definitely an awe experience without a doubt.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's neat.
Yeah. So looking back at your childhood, did you have any experiences that you kind of think back like, huh, that was kind of samadhi, or maybe even a little opening there, that kind of maybe was a preview of things to come at all?
Yeah, I'm finding this is a common thread for so many of us, but absolutely, it was the ocean. It was always the ocean. I
Yeah.
remember, yeah, in fact, gosh, I want to know more about your experiences too. I remember a specific moment, which now I know, I suppose could be called a Kensho experience, right? I used to walk along the beach and the waves would come in and out, and I would ask questions. And if the wave touched my feet, that was a yes. And if it didn't come quite up far enough, it was a no. And we'd have these little conversations. I must have been, I think, starting around 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, maybe 12, 13. So I'd walk along the beach and, and if it was a question that I wanted to be a yes, but it was a no, I'd feel sad, and I'd say, well, ocean, why hast thou forsaken me? This kind of thing. So we'd have the hours I'd spend having these conversations.
I do that with fortune cookies, but go ahead.
Okay, cool.
I ask a question with a fortune cookie.
Exactly. Or the 8 ball or whatever that ball is. So it's a little game I had with the ocean, and it felt very real. It felt as if I was talking to God or great
Mhm.
spirit or, presence, something. I felt as if it was me and the little I, me, my, and the big all.
Mhm.
One day I was having these little conversations, and a wave came up and it caressed my feet. And I don't know what happened, but I wasn't there. It was like I was that rush of water. It was so beautiful. I remember that whenever it was, I kind of came back into this more encapsulated body. It was the tears were so real, and yet they were inseparable from the salt of the ocean. This
Mhm.
salt and that salt, no difference. And oh gosh, even thinking of it now, I'm kind of feeling that heaviness behind my eyes. It was so beautiful. And it happened with a tree too when I was a kid. The breathing of the tree and my breathing, that exchange that happens. I didn't even know about, hadn't learned yet about oxygen, carbon dioxide, respiration, photosynthesis. It just was one breath. So nature is a powerful invitation to this practice. And it just pulls you right in like a siren song because it's just that beautiful.
Mhm. Yeah. Certainly agree with you on that. How about music? Did you have any kind of flow states with music that maybe kind of touched on kind of give you a sense of that kind of mind state at all?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So remember, like we were talking before about how it was a place to kind of pour emotions into,
Hmm.
which was very helpful as a teenager and a tween and adolescent. But there'd be times when there would just be that feeling. I'd be singing and playing at the top of my lungs, but you know, no one was doing it. It was just that feeling, just taking up the entire space. And somehow when it was over, everything felt more cathartic. There was a relief. There was a sense of everything's really okay, even if things are still falling apart, you know, kind of like you feel maybe after a big cry, but not. It was bigger than that. But a real shift in music came in 2000. Oh, it said my internet connection's unstable. Are you getting me okay? Okay.
Yeah, you sound a little
In
buzzed
about
over it, but
2000. Oh, sorry about that.
it's
I'm not
okay.
sure why.
Just tell me.
2000. No. 2000. When I discovered the force. No, just kidding.
Right.
2003. I was invited to a place called the Temple of the Universe. And this was right before I started Zen practice. No, 2002. It's a yoga temple. And this was a yoga as in all 8 limbs of yoga, not just the asana, doing the poses, doing the class. And one of their main practices was kirtan, chanting mantras from various traditions, rooted in the Hindu, Sanskrit, and Yogananda even tradition, but branched out into other forms of chanting as well. Because in Hawaii, we learned chanting. And then there's chanting in Japan. All over the world, there's a form of chanting. So I was introduced to this practice, this meditative practice of using musical mantra repetitively, and sometimes for hours at a time. And ultimately, I became trained in how to lead kirtan and write my own mantras. And I now do it all. I now regularly lead kirtan all over the place. And that is a transformative practice. That's definitely, it's not Zen, and yet it is, because it's so inclusive. But music and meditation and presence, and it all just happens there with this practice. I love it. Mm-hmm.
Was that your introduction to Eastern spirituality, that organization, or had you done some reading and stuff like that before?
I'd already been a yoga practitioner for many years.
Oh, okay.
But more like going to lots of classes, so peripherally, I suppose I was exposed to Eastern tradition. That was the first place that I went where it was front and center, immersive practice based in teachers who have a lineage. And he did also incorporate, the teacher there was, many people know him, Michael Singer. Oprah Winfrey discovered him when he wrote his first book called The Surrender Experiment. So he's become kind of a better known name in the wider spiritual world, not necessarily the Zen world, but certainly, yoga and other fields. Anyway, but he would bring in some Zen teaching as well. And that sparked my interest.
In Zen?
In Zen, yes, in Zen, well, in meditation. And I would receive some of the information through him. But what really got me into Zen, do you want to hear that story?
Sure.
Is it time for that
do you have any other like spiritual or meditation stuff that kind of led up to Zen, or is this a good segue at this point?
I think this is kind of where it happens. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I like how would be, so I'd be going and studying there and learning how to meditate, and enjoying it very much. And then I'd be going to my yoga classes daily. And at the end of yoga class, we have this shavasana, this corpse pose, where you just lay back and integrate everything that you've done. It's usually about 5 minutes or so. And I found that I wanted it to go a lot longer than 5 minutes, that some new doorway was calling, something was calling me through some distant doorway that would just, as soon as I started going that direction, the teacher would say, okay, everybody sit up. Thank you. Have a great day. Namaste. I'd be like, no, not yet. So I decided I wanted to find a more formal meditation group, because even in the yoga temple, the Temple of the Universe. It was not a formalized practice. It was kind of part of a bunch of other things going on. So at the time, I had a little girl, a toddler, just a little one, and childcare was an issue. So finding time, the Temple of the Universe had childcare, but finding a meditation group would require finding a babysitter, which is expensive. Just happened as things work, I was looking I was looking through a little pamphlet or a local newspaper, and there was a tiny little ad.
Where was this? Where in Florida?
In Gainesville, Florida. There was a little ad that said meditation group starting, child care provided. That was it. I was there. I was like, that's the one for me. It was if you ask, there it is. And so I showed up. It was at the local UU church. And it just so happens that the facilitator for that group was the UU minister, who was also a practicing Sambo Zen senior student who became a teacher during that time. His name,
who was this?
Meredith Garman. He's now with Boundless Way Zen. And he was just an amazing portal, what he offered into this path of Zen that just changed everything. So that's how it started. And then he invited Valerie Forstman down the following year to, she was in Dallas at the time, and he found a little retreat space. A UU had a little facility south of Gainesville, and we all went, and I met Valerie, and I was pregnant at that time with my second child, who's now almost 14. And she asked me, I'd already done the koan Mu with Meredith and Ruben. So we began exploring some other koans with Valerie. And
miscellaneous series.
Exactly. Yes. In fact, the one that got me, the one that just made the whole world just go was who's hearing? Yeah. And the time she asked me that question, the bird song just outside the window was so vibrant, it's still there. Who's hearing? And something just, I don't know. And that was it. That was it for me.
So what motivated you getting into Zen? I've seen patterns, talking to so many people, and both before and during this podcast series. There seems to be different categories, and for a lot of people, it's often a mix of categories. But some people they just feel anxious and they don't want to feel anxious anymore, or they're depressed and don't want to feel depressed anymore. You could almost say it's like a mental health type thing, right? Other people, it's like more existential, why am I here? Like, I'm really not comfortable with the idea that I'm going to die, and there's some sort of resolution to this. And other people, it seems just they're like, I'm really curious to explore what is going on. It's not so much a wanting something cured, but it's more just like almost like a sense of adventure, like, where would you put yourself in that matrix, if at all?
It's a very good.
I'm sure it's not exhaustive. There could be other motivations, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Or it could be your dad's a temple priest and you have to go to the monastery.
Great. Well, that's a great question. I've never really examined that too much, other than it unfolded. It unfolded in kind of almost the way, the stepwise way that we were just talking about, from the way I was raised, sort of this pan spiritual awareness, this immersive connection with nature. Maybe part of it was too, I was always criticized for that. Like, there was maybe a little bit of angst. I was in the Eckerd College Search and Rescue program, which is really great, and I learned a lot, and it was wonderful. But when we were supposed to be doing drills, like tying off fenders or I would get distracted by dolphins, or the way that the water was moving in front of me, and I would it would just fill me up, and people would say, they'd call me absent-minded or need to focus. Same thing when I was a marine biologist. I have my master's in marine biology from University of South Florida, we'd be out there collecting specimens or, going down in a submersible, all wonderful things. But I would be so overcome and just taken with the absolute miracle and beauty of, and, that's a good thing. And yet, I wasn't getting the work done. So maybe part of it was just a sense of, go ahead.
Something intuitively pulling you in that direction.
Right, exactly. And how to reckon those two things, this absolute sense of, oh my gosh. And people would sometimes openly be like, you can't do that. That's not how you function in the world. And part of me was like, I feel bad. And yet somehow I knew that wasn't true. There's a way. And I think that's what really propelled practice. And then, other things, as you get older, just basic adulting, in fact, this happened. And then I started with Valerie, just kind of knowing, I didn't understand anything. I didn't understand what the chants meant. She would give these beautiful, beautiful taste shows, these Dharma talks that I didn't understand, conceptually. And they're not designed that way, of course. But the embodiment of compassion that just poured from her words and from her somehow gave me that same feeling of, this is it, whatever this is it. And I had a Kensho experience right around this time that I told Meredith about and Valerie about. Same thing. I couldn't explain it other than the only three words that just kept coming out were, this is it. And that was enough.
Was this during a retreat or just going about your daily business?
The Kensho experience
was,
it was me going to work. Yeah, it was just me going to work one day, and I had a cup of tea, and I opened the one. There were two doors to go through to get out into the parking lot, and in between the first door and the second door, everything fell away. It was the most remarkable sense of not being here and being everywhere at the same time. And then I made it to my car somehow, and drove and went to work, but it persisted, for a good period of time. And afterwards I was so excited, to tell them. And then I said, I don't even know what I'm telling you. I just know that this is it.
Were you working on new at the time?
Yes. In fact, I think I went a little bit out of order. That's going back. That was when Meredith and Ruben agreed it was time to begin koans if I wanted to. And I said, yes. And I was given it was like receiving a jewel, So, remarkable. So, so there was a sense of wanting to reckon, what this is it is. I knew I didn't need to know. I just knew I need to keep sitting. But as I kept practicing, the kids were getting older. So now I'm a mom, not so young mom of two little kids. And that's a full-time job.
How old are your kids right now? 14 and
18. Oh, yeah. So I started writing it out because I was having a really kind of a hard time maintaining a practice, as a full-time and working mom, both. Like my mom, I had a good model how to be a full-time working parent and a full-time mom at the same time somehow. And so I started writing, for therapy, because writing has always been another source of, working with these.
Was this on your own, or were you working with a therapist with the writing?
Well, I was working on my own. I was just journaling daily. And eventually it all came together into a book. It's my first book called Meditation for Moms and Dads. 108 tips for mindful parents and caregivers, because I think a lot of the things I experience aren't just for parents, but anybody who takes care of anything or anyone. And so there were 108 tips, and I interviewed other parents who had some kind of practice, whether Zen or otherwise, and discovered that and I have some poems I wrote about it. Let's see if I have one that might apply here. You want to hear, Paul?
Yeah.
I'm just free flowing here, so you can tell me. Okay. Well, I have a short one and I have a long one. I have quite a few, but let me do the short one. It's called The Trash Can.
Okay.
So I think maybe it helps with the idea of think about being a working mom and everything's a mess and lots to take care of and feeling overwhelmed. Overfull, unemptied, spilling out onto the floor, glaring at me, waiting for my statement, my admonishment, my punishment, my declaration, my busyness, my purpose. Glaring back, I see it change. Whose trash can is too full?
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Sure. Anyway, there's a bunch of others in here.
Yeah.
But it was helpful to write it out and to find the practice, like as Valerie says, in the midst.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could totally relate to the, I have kids, and when they were babies and toddlers, I have to say, it was a period of my life I went longest without a sitting practice. But I was a little bit of a weird case because I had kind of had some cosmic experiences kind of not too much earlier before I had kids. And I was kind of craving like being grounded in normality. You know what I mean? Like I'd spent, like a decade kind of like chasing it, whatever it is. And, and like coming out of that, I kind of wanted like, I don't know, just normality. I don't really know how to explain it. So I think that played into it. But still, that said, I kind of regret not maintaining a sitting practice through those, couple years, because it was kind of a stressful time having toddlers. Like it was more difficult than I was expecting. I think a lot of lack of sleep. My kids weren't really sleepers.
Absolutely. No, and you sleep when they sleep, because if you try to practice, then you'll fall asleep. But I like what you just said. It makes so much sense, though. I think we're always talking about this whole cosmic element and and all that. But really, it's the reckoning of the two. It's that middle path that is our practice, right? Because, and that Zen koan about being on top of the 100-foot pole, that's not the end. You have to jump off. And Buddha had to leave the Bodhi tree. And and the box herding pictures end up in the bazaar, the not bazaar, but the marketplace, the bazaar. Yeah. Not bizarre as in strange. This idea of being very much, in this world with phones and computers and toddlers and so on.
Yeah, there's a lot of advantages to like traditional monastic practice.
Mm-hmm.
Like I did for a year, and like I definitely like learned how to do samadhi there. I'm not sure I would have learned it in the same way in a different context. But at the same, but one downside though is I think it's easy to kind of have this like safe space around you in some ways. Whereas like the advantage of lay practice is you're always in the mix and you're constantly being tested of kind of where your practice is. I think that is one advantage for sure.
I agree. And I think is balance too. I mean, I derive so much. I've never been in a monastic long-term situation like you, but I do regular sessions. Mm-hmm. And boy, without those, I mean, they're just so important and so powerful to set aside that time, like you say, to create that. I forgot the term you used, but I don't know. It's a container, Yeah. It's and then daily practice, of course. So so that I think that was like back to your original question of what brought me to Zen and what continues to bring me to Zen day after day is that we all are, but very much in this world and love it. Even the not so easy parts. And the more you practice, the more you love even the not so easy parts. And so it really helps reckon resolving the matter, as they say, right? It's beautiful and it just keeps resolving. Like there's no endpoint of resolving. It's a
right.
Yeah.
So when you first went to Meredith's group, was there anything about Meredith yourself that kind of interested you in practice? And the reason I ask this is it's got a little bit of a leading question, I'll admit it. And because a lot of people, what really seems to hook them into Zen is when they first come face to face with a kind of a senior practitioner, and they get a sense of like stability or just holding reality in a kind of in a special way. Did you get a sense of that with Meredith or Valerie or any of the people there? That
Absolutely. In fact, I think Henry in One Blade of Grass refers to one of the first times he was around Zen practitioners or Zen people, and he said, I want to be like that, something like that, like something in his heart knew that there was a resonance there, an incredible resonance. Not that you want to copy a person, but whatever it is that they're embodying is something that feels intimate to you as well.
yeah.
I think that's a better way to put it, because I don't want to, it's not about mimicry. It's about how is what?
Almost energetic in a way, embodied.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, there's an energetics about it that, so I haven't quite figured out yet, but oh my gosh, and it feels familiar too, somehow. Like, even though I don't know how to do this and I'm living differently, I know this somehow, it's that true to, I think, it's our authentic nature. So I felt that very much so with Meredith. Meredith, he has I haven't seen him in years. Meredith, if you're watching, I would love to see you, because I have so much gratitude for his, it was almost as if it was like, yes, of course you're here. Of course. It was so welcoming and so immediate. There was no question when I walked in that this wasn't my sitting group, or something like that. And he had that ability to just make you feel instantly, this is for you. And he is a tremendously grounded and compassionate teacher. And I loved how he gave me Moo. I loved how it all happened, me telling him the story and then him making the invitation. And I remember thinking, gosh, that's a wonderful way to be with people, so
Having dropped away prior to working with Moo, did you still work on Moo for a while, or was that a pretty quick experience? What was that process like for you?
It's a very good question. It was a few months, but I had another experience while working with Moo that
Okay.
kind of brought it home. And as you know, every koan is essentially Moo. So it's not as if I've ever stopped working with Moo. I can see it. It's a forever process, but there's a certain something that happens when you realize, oh my gosh, it's like almost an astonishment that happens. And that happened, I'd say, within, I'm trying to remember, 2 to 3 months of receiving Moo. Now, that being said, I don't want to put out anybody who's out there working on Moo, or a student saying, oh, well, she got it in 3 months. That means, and that's taking me 6 months. That's, no, it doesn't matter, because koan after koan after koan, Moo would just, there's no, you know what I mean? There's not like this much time goes by and then you get it. It's this constant process of clarifying. It's a very dynamic one. So I hesitate to say, oh, I got Moo in 3 months, because it's not like that, as you know.
I think it was even Yasutani who said, a lot of times quick kensho without a samadhi. I'm paraphrasing. I don't think he put it exactly this way, but quick kensho without a samadhi base is kind of worthless, other than kind of like a beacon that you can, where and I know plenty of people who probably have never had a discrete kensho experience, but clearly are living from a non-dual space from many years from practicing. I mean, there's definitely not one right way to do it.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's just so personal and so dynamic, and there are many ways to open to this fundamental, wider reality, and they're all beautiful. So I think a prescription type of approach just doesn't apply to our practice. These are all just tools and pointers, to help us, and then we personalize it as we go. Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah. So you mentioned Habito a couple of times. What was the connection? You were in Florida. He was in Texas. Was he a visiting teacher, or was he Meredith's teacher? What was the connection there?
Yeah. So, Ruben Habito is someone I hold in such high regard. And he came into my life early in practice. Funny story. I hadn't met Valerie yet, and I had just, been working on Moo with Meredith. And at one point, Meredith said, yeah, I think it's time to talk to Ruben. Would you be open to talking to my teacher, and
Oh,
he can check you?
Habito was Ruben's teacher.
Yes.
And
No, Habito was Ruben Habito was Meredith Garman's teacher.
oh, that's what I meant to say. Sorry if I said it backwards. Yeah.
Mhm.
And is that who he got authorization from, or did he go on to get work with someone else?
I'm not sure how. You'd have to chat with Meredith about his process or his timeline, how he went from Sambo Zen and Ruben Habito to Boundless Way. I'm actually not sure,
Okay.
because then once Valerie became my teacher, I was I was all in working with Valerie at that
Mhm.
point. And
See.
Meredith moved to New York, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But at that time anyway, he was working with Ruben, and so we just talked on the phone,
Mhm.
and he checked me on Moo and asked me a bunch of questions. And it was such a wonderful conversation, and I felt so much gratitude. And at that time, I was about maybe, I don't know, 6 months pregnant, something like that. Anyway, he said, you would be really nice if you could come to a session, and we're having one in like 3 months, something like that. And I got so excited, not knowing exactly what a session was. I just figured it's a chance to.
You went to Session as 9 months pregnant?
Well, no, I think actually I was probably further along than that, because I calculated it would have had a 1-month-old baby. Yeah, so that must have been 7 months. He said that it was 3 months. Anyway, but no, I didn't actually know what a session was. I just knew that I wanted to work with him, and I wanted to do more. So I said, oh, yes, I'd love to. And if it's okay, I'll be bringing my 1-month-old baby. Not knowing, and of course, then there was kind of a compassionate pause. And he told me, he said, he explained, that's not possible. And his wife, Maria Habito, they have 2 wonderful sons. And she was already a Zen teacher, I think a Zen master, even when I can't remember, don't quote me on this, but definitely, deep practitioner, teacher, when her sons were born. And she had to modify her life considerably. Well, they both did, of course. But I think in particular, Maria did. And for me, just starting, he said, it might not be possible to go to sesshin for a while. And I thought like a brick had just landed on my head. It was just, I was ready to just rock and deep dive. And I was being, very compassionately. And it was his way of encouraging me to stay on the path, but also understand, that this is a lifelong path, right? It's not like instant gratification time. And actually that's what actually fueled this book, because I was determined, not just therapy for me to write it out, but I was also determined to figure out how to deeply practice. And that's where Valerie came in. Week after week, we doksan on Skype.
How were you introduced to Valerie?
Meredith brought her to Florida for
that's right.
a weekend retreat. Yes. But then our group, when Meredith left, he took a job in New York. And when he left, our group continued meeting sort of without a teacher. So Valerie became our distance teacher. And every week we'd set her up in a computer, this is pre-Zoom on Skype. And she'd be there and she'd do doksan with each of us. She'd give us talks. So she was our remote teacher.
Was this before or after you started Moo, when you started working with her?
This is after, because then I went through several miscellaneous koans with Meredith. And then when I took refuge with Valerie as my formal teacher, then she became, I did the rest of the koans with her.
Mm-hmm. Was a lot of that phone based?
We met on Skype.
Oh, Skype.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then when we had a retreat center, she would come. So she came to Florida for years, 2 to 3 times a year, with Scott Thornton, her now husband, and who's also an assistant teacher. So
I interviewed him too. I'll send you the link.
Oh, I'd love that. That'd be great. I'm so glad. Yeah, Scott's a very wonderful teacher, friend, just phenomenal person, as you know. So I feel very blessed and so fortunate to have them both in my life. So anyway, so we met, and here, going through this period of time, there'd be some weeks I would just be like, Valerie, I can't do this. I can't, it's too much. I want to go to sashina. There's so much I want that I can't have in Zen. About yearning and wanting and desire. Mine was for Zen, ironically, that I couldn't seem to access. And week after week, she would bring me, back to the practice, back to the nature of the practice. And it just kept me coming back and still am. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so if you finished the Kwan curriculum, I think you told me, right?
I've done one full round. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was primarily through Valerie, or did you mix it up with other teachers too?
Right. So I was primarily through Valerie, but back to Ruben. That's right. I know it's kind of flip-flopping, but I never met Ruben during that whole time. So just working with Valerie, but I heard about him all the time. I listened to his talks. Same for Henry. I'd be working on a koan and I'd queue up one of Henry's Tay shows, so I felt like, I became familiar with both of them over the years, but had never met. Finally, there was a time my kids were both old enough. I went to sesshin with Ruben, and it was life-changing. And I was so grateful to be there. In some ways, again, I felt like I'd always been there. There was no gap. Another way, it was a very important event. And then same with Henry, same idea. I finally got
having studied with three of them, how would you compare and contrast their Dokusan styles?
I could add a fourth. Yeah, I could also add a fourth, Yamada Rion Roshi.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got to do Dokusan with him too. A few times now. So contrast them, compare them. Yes, the comparison would be for all four, compassion. In their way, in their authentic way, completely different personalities and everything else. The compassion was absolute. It just poured out. I never once felt judged or taught or, as if there was sort of a barrier, that kind of personal space thing or anything like that. I felt this immediate embrace for all four. I was most nervous with the Yamada Rion Roshi the first time. And then I was just so nervous. And that was just me. There was nothing to be nervous about. That was just me in response to, he's the abbot, and I want to do a good job for Valerie, and I know a little Japanese. I wish I knew more. All this self-judgment was happening, and so it made me very sweaty palmed the first time. In Kenshukai this past summer, that all dissolved. I just really felt warmth and gratitude for Yamada.
Explain to people what Kenshukai is.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Kenshukai is the annual teacher training. It's for senior students, assistant teachers, and masters. It was my first in Sanbo Zen, right? And it's our opportunity to study with Yamada Rion Roshi, to sit with him, but also to do deep dives into the koan curriculum as a group. It was my first one, and I was just overcome with gratitude. I always wondered, I always got all those years studying with Valerie and her generosity, I always wondered, this unconditional generosity is so seemingly so rare in this world. And I don't think that anymore. But at the time, it was, difficult times, and her generosity just poured out. After going to Kenshukai, I got a sense of why. Our practice and our sangha, it's a self-sustaining conduit of generosity. It's a taproot. It just ever giving. And I really felt it. I was in the middle of the divorce. I was in the middle of a divorce at the time, and very difficult time. I almost didn't go to my first Kenshikai. Same reservation. What if this is not the time? Time needs to be perfect. This is not a perfect time. Blah blah blah.
Right.
And of course, our practice teaches us that's exactly the time. Like Scott would say, just lean in. That's and there it was. It was sitting and working and practicing with an embrace.
When you finished the Kwan curriculum, was there already discussion that Valerie wanted you to step into the teaching role, or did it come as a surprise to you? What were those social dynamics like?
Yeah, it's a good question. That was an unfolding too. I think I think part of it had to do with Mountain Cloud Zen Center. They have a lot of students, and there's sort of a need for teachers. So when, that was kind of floated as maybe it might be a time to start doing some teaching, I found that I would like to try that, to offer and see how it goes. And turns out I love it. I really. Are
you working on Mu with some people right now?
I am. I'm working on Mu with 2 people. I have 3 students, and working on Mu with 2, and then another one who is further along in the introductory koans. But also, and I'm just starting on that part of it.
Is this sorry to interrupt, but was it a student that passed through Mu with you, or someone who'd already passed through and then
she'd already passed through with Henry? Yes, right. So it feels wonderful to be able to offer that support both to Mountain Cloud and to the students, but also to my own practice, because it's just, they say you really want to learn something, and learning is not really the right word for Zen, but teach it. So it does apply in terms of keeping my practice very, very deep and focused and committed. But the other thing that I'm doing with Mountain Cloud is serving as a facilitator for the Original Love program. So, so I get to help mentor, facilitate, give talks sometimes when needed or invited. All great practice for me to be able to teach or share. Teaching, again, I'm an assistant teacher, so I'm very much in training, and so I feel like it's an opportunity to share what I've learned so far, but more than that, just keep growing, just keep deepening. And I'll offer, whatever I can, because it's that wellspring again. It's that give and receive that's constantly happening. So I'm really enjoying this process of learning how to become a teacher.
Are you, as far as Original Love goes, are you going through their teacher training program, or are you teaching in the teacher training program? Are you involved with that process at all?
Right. I'm one of the mentors, or one of the teachers or mentors of the teacher training program, or the facilitator program, I think we're calling it. Yeah.
All right, so people are signing up for that. Looks like it's going to be a thing. Cool.
We've had our first mentor group meetings, and it's just, what a wonderful, it's so exciting, in this world on fire, right? To see such beautiful and heartfelt commitment from people with a serious practice all over the world to want to feel the same way that I do. They want to deepen their practice while also giving whatever's appropriate, whatever they can. And it's very exciting. And Henry is he saw that could happen and made it happen.
Maybe this is not the forum to talk about it, but I mean, how's Henry doing? I know he struggled with the post-concussive syndrome. Is he getting better, or?
Well, the best of my knowledge is he's definitely healing. It's a slow but steady process.
Yeah, and he talked about it on this podcast, so I'm not like.
Yes, I understand. No, he's really open about it, and actually, I could comment on that as a learning to be a teacher, and talking in our last facilitator session with the mentees or the trainees. We were talking about what makes a good facilitator, like what qualities do you see that you want in yourself, but you also might see in other teachers. And it was brought up that authenticity is like the number one. Because you were asking me like even about the differences between Henry and Valerie and Yamada Rion and Roshi and Ruben Habito Roshi. You know, it's not, they're very different. All four of them are so different. They're unique people from completely different geographical regions and cultures and languages and, you know, everything. But they're so authentic. They're so true to themselves. So when Henry just openly shares, you know, that he had a bad accident and he's got to, you know, cover the screen for a while and just use, I feel like everybody can relate because that's such a human thing we share. And a Zen master and a Zen student are still one body, you know, and that compassion thing happens again, that he understands. He's not up here, you know, saying, well, you people have problems, but I don't. In fact, he even said in a recent Dharma talk, a recent Teisho, he said, yeah, he goes, I some days I'm just a mess. I'm just a total mess. He goes, and I'm okay with that. You know, there's the teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think we've kind of covered a lot of the narrative. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we kind of wrap up? Do you have any other books or projects we can talk about that you haven't?
Sure, thank you. Maybe I will. So part of what Ruben, this is something that hit me that Ruben said over the pandemic, actually, you know, I haven't been able to sit with him as much since post-pandemic. I really want to. But one thing he said in one of the many sessions, online sessions, was that, you know, we have to take our practice out into the world, you know, this bodhisattva vow, and offer in the best way that feels right and natural for us, not in a didactic way, but just, you know, just our practice, the compassion and what we can offer to others. And I have been very concerned about what's happening, well, here in Florida in particular, although it's all over the country, with critical race theory and trying to suppress history, and also the tremendous environmental threat and crisis that we're under.
Mhm.
So I wrote a book. It's a novel. It's called Islands of Cedars. If you can see the Islands of Cedars.
Yeah, I see. Good. Thanks.
It just so happened that that January 2023 was the 100-year anniversary of the Rosewood massacre, which was a racially motivated massacre, happened in Florida that nobody knows about because it's not taught in schools. And it occurred in a place called Rosewood, which is near a beautiful coastal fishing village called Cedar Key, which is under significant environmental impact now with climate change.
Mhm.
So I merged the two into a narrative historical fiction, which explains in detail the history of Rosewood, Native American history, a little bit of Jewish history, as well as the history of Cedar Key. And it also introduces the incredible ecology of the area and how it's impacted currently. So it spans 100 years, as well as a little bit of ancient history. And it tells a story of four descendants of the time of Rosewood. So it's the first in a series. The next one is going to build from there. And I feel that one way I can take Ruben's advice is to maybe help counteract some of these constrictive forces that are happening in this world. And just open my heart and try to share, you know, what I can through writing. So it's all connected.
Cool. Did you get any training from Henry about your writing? Because obviously he's an extremely talented and practiced writer.
I would love to. I did send him a copy of the book, but he is one busy guy. Ruben did do an endorsement on the back, which I'm so grateful for. He put this novel is a story of this complicatedly entangled country and community called America, with its natural beauty and its stark humanity, its lights and its shadows, the violence and agony both hidden and exposed, but also the grace, the consolations, and hopes for redemption. So And Barry, I'd love to send you a copy.
Yeah,
If you,
sure. I love it. Thank you. Yeah.
my pleasure.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This is was super fun. I really enjoyed it.
Me too.
And then you'll send me the link to your practice group and stuff like that, right?
I'd be happy to, and I hope to meet you sometime, and maybe I can interview you, because I would love to know more about you, because what you're doing here, speaking of generosity and taking time to talk to all of us, is it's really such a gift. It's so thoughtful. Thank you.
Thank you.